see the ball go through the net. But I think, every game, regardless, you're making shots, you're not, it feels really, really good to have your teammates behind.
When the ball passes through the net, it feels amazing. But truly, having your teammates support you during every game is incredible, regardless of whether you're making shots or not. Lexie Hull stated as much. To be honest, when she made some significant admissions, the basketball community is in shock. It completely contradicts what we believe to be true about Caitlin Clark. Nobody anticipated this. We now have a better understanding of Clark's personality, her journey, and the inner workings of the Indiana Fever thanks to some outrageous information that Lexie revealed. Social media is exploding, teammates are chattering, and fans are astonished. What exactly did Lexie reveal, and how will things change? Will Caitlin's image last forever? Right now, we're delving into every explosive detail. Lexie Hull was well known before all the skepticism and before she truly struggled to maintain her job. At Stanford, she was unstoppable, right? A brave athlete who battled her way to a national title. Her self-assurance was evident on the court. She had a keen sense of focus. Her motivation was unparalleled. Therefore, it wasn't simply about potential when the Indiana Fever selected her 6th overall. They genuinely had faith in her. They saw someone who could think quickly, act astutely, and truly steer the team towards change. But pay attention, the professional stage is a completely different animal. The WNBA strength, speed, and relentless pressure. These are not merely physical obstacles. They are also mental struggles. All of a sudden, Hull was more than ever on the bench. Her minutes vanished game after game. Her confidence grew along with them. These days, the applause she used to receive merely reverberates and confuses you. Later on, she did confess. She became just another name on the roster after playing a crucial role in a winning squad. She wasn't the only one who felt that way. Every player in this league was previously the top player on their college team. They're all struggling now just to make a difference and stand out once more. Here's the problem though. In reality, Lex's battle was a component of a much larger issue. Something area, long before she arrived, had been simmering with the Indiana Fever. Not only was the team losing games, but they were also losing faith. They had completely changed as a result of years of failure. Losing had become commonplace, even expected, and there was an air of calm resignation in the dressing room. No amount of fresh talent could make up for that absence of a true winning culture or accountability. Furthermore, it went beyond simply missing shots. It has to do with a lack of purpose. Encouragement had been replaced by criticism, and there was less and less chance of things improving with each passing season. Then Caitlin Clark appeared like a massive storm on the horizon. Her entrance was more than a typical signing. It was a complete change in energy. She entered with such gravity that everyone's attention was drawn to her. All of a sudden, the team was being pursued. Expectations were rising like floodwaters in crowded arenas. However, Clark didn't care about celebrity or ticket sales. It was intimate. She was suddenly blazing through the Fever's locker room with the same ferocious intensity that made her a superstar at Iowa. She wasn't there to fit in with their way of life. To revise it, she was present. Her high standards of performance challenged more than simply the team's losing mindset. It proclaimed war on it. The transformation was evident from her earliest days. Conversations became louder, practices became more focused, and the atmosphere was electrifying with something fresh. Responsibility. Lexie even observed it in her entire demeanor, not just in Clark's play. Caitlin handled herself with a focus that truly demanded respect, both on and off the court. Getting to know her is very amazing. Later on, people would realize that Clark was thoughtful, grounded, and remarkably mature for someone with so much weight behind the scenes. However, her calmness was accompanied by a constant expectation that everyone in her vicinity would share her enthusiasm. Insiders claim that one of their early practices together was the true turning moment. Frustration simply erupted after a series of negligent turnovers. Clark, who is renowned for her sharpness, abruptly stopped the drill. And what emerged? It wasn't a pleasant little motivational speech that came next. A verbal storm broke out. Her tone was completely straightforward and unvarnished as she called out multiple veterans. The gym fell silent. You might use a knife to ease the stress. The cheerful rookie that everyone loved in the media wasn't this. This was the version that was created via intense rivalry. Her remarks struck a deep chord, revealing all the weaknesses in a team that had shied away from genuine conflict for far too long. The coaching staff faced an enormous problem all of a sudden. This was their highly valued rookie, their path to prominence, publicly questioning the team's entire leadership. She had a strong drive. Yes, but it's also a little risky. There were rumors that someone was attempting to get her back, instructing her to calm down in order to lessen the discomfort she had caused. However, they all understood in their hearts that this wasn't devastation. It was a change. They therefore made the dangerous decision to let her fire burn. Years of tactics and signings hadn't made the fever wake up, so there was no interference, no silencing, just a silent gamble that her intensity could. Additionally, Lexie Hull recognized something completely different in Clark's combative attitude, while some players completely shied away from it. With everything at stake, Lexie realized that this was her final opportunity. This was more than just another practice or game. It was the turning point in her life. Additionally, she made the decision to not back down in the face of Caitlin Clark's demanding intensity. Get up and face it. Lexie Hull had a different perspective on Clark's fire than the other players, who felt totally overpowered. She perceived a challenge and an offer to discover the aspect of herself that had previously flourished under duress. She began staying after practice, doing extra drills, persevering through fatigue, and overcoming the silent concerns that had prevented her from progressing. Lexie stayed with Clark when she stayed late. They were equally intense. Two distinct fires that are pursuing the same objective. Soon after, an amazing thing began to take place. The spark that had been absent from Hull's game started to come back. They began developing this chemistry together. The court was electrified by that. Hull's renewed hustle was answered with remarkable precision by Clark's extraordinary court vision. Caitlin would sling passes through almost unfathomable spaces and illogical angles. And for some reason, Lexie would always be there, finishing strong at the rim and catching them in stride. Deep trust gradually replaced what had started out as anxiety. The speed at which their dynamic developed astounded coaches and colleagues. Comfort was not the source of this connection. It was created via conflict, perspiration, annoyance, and a shared unwillingness to give up. Paul would subsequently claim that Caitlin changed everything. She really did mean it. Clark's presence wasn't merely concerning highlight reels or statistics. It was about unadulterated passion, conviction, and an almost infectious will to uplift everyone in her vicinity. Lex's return turned to become a significant symbol. Anyone could overcome self-doubt if she could, and soon the rest of the Indiana Fever began to feel the same way. Knowing that Clark would discover her for the part, Aaliyah Boston started creating more difficult screens. Once hesitant, Kelsey Mitchell began running the court as if each possession was vital. Even the bench players found new energy, pushing harder in practice and feeding off the electricity that now raced through every game, knowing that Clark's eyes saw nothing. The Fever's offense underwent a radical change. No longer dependably, no longer stagnant. They played with a sense of synchronization that could only result from a common belief, as well as with purpose and hunger. Here's the worst part, though. There is always a cost associated with greatness. The pressure simply blew up as the Fever continued to gain ground. The once far-off media spotlight was suddenly blazing like a scorching sun. After kind of fading into the background, Lexie Hull was suddenly the subject of intensive investigation. Every error, missed opportunity, and defensive blunder was exaggerated, analyzed, and criticized on the internet. Her every action was scrutinized by fans and commentators, who nearly forgot that there was a human behind the shirt. I'm still learning how to manage the weight of the spotlight. There was an overwhelming amount of noise. However, Lexie was determined not to let it shatter her once more. She began using that pressure as fuel, transforming it into this silent power. She said in a rare interview that it was really difficult to keep up with Clark's pace. It was the most difficult thing I had ever done. It transforms your entire life, she remarked. Every day turned into this endurance challenge. Imagine working out before sunlight in the morning, studying films late at night rather than sleeping, and never-ending mental struggles with exhaustion and self-doubt. She came to the realization that greatness is not glamorous. It's isolating. It requires sacrifices that the majority of people will never witness. However, despite all, something inside of her simply solidified. An unbreakable resilience. She was no longer seeking acceptance by striving for perfection. She was pursuing it for herself. Furthermore, success fosters envy in addition to admiration. Rivals began to take offense at the Fever's increase throughout the league. Respect for Clark's skill soon gave way to animosity. Opponents used every opportunity to rough her up, testing her limitations with cheap shots and hard fouls. It was an obvious message. You attempt to break her spirit if you are unable to halt her game. However, they refused to tolerate the Fever. Now a major emotional support system for the team, Lexie Hull steadfastly remained by her teammates' side. Lexie didn't even think twice when Clark was heavily fouled during a heated game against a rival veteran. In a matter of seconds, she stood directly in front of the aggressor, her voice piercing the confusion. As tempers boiled, the benches nearly cleared. However, Hull's message was very obvious. An assault on Caitlin was an assault on all of them. That intense altercation turned into a pivotal event. The Fever were no longer a struggling group in search of their identity. They were a cohesive force that had been put to the test in combat and passionately guarded one another. The team had discovered something more profound than triumph thanks to Hull's rekindled enthusiasm and Clark's unwavering determination. They had discovered loyalty, fraternity, and an unbreakable connection formed by a common effort. Caitlin Clark's statements did not reveal the real secret to her leadership. It was with her. Big speeches and memorable slogans weren't necessary for her. Her passion was more powerful than any motivational speech could be. That intense glare following a failed rotation. Her passes were so precise that they required preparation. The unspoken belief that each player would give it their all. These turned into her world's unwritten regulations. Clark didn't attract followers. She created fighters. It was also more than just a return for Lexie. It was a complete rebirth. The toughness that had previously characterized her at Stanford had come back stronger than before, molded by the brutal realities of professional basketball. She was no longer only getting by in the league. In one of the most competitive settings possible, she was flourishing. And here's the thing. Their narrative was only getting started. Because what followed would put their friendship as well as their skill to the test. When celebrity attempted to destroy trust, how did it endure? Stay tuned for the answer, which may completely surprise you as celebrity and family come together. Therefore, the Indiana Fever essentially went from being completely ignored to the focal point of every sports discussion when Caitlin Clark entered the WNBA spotlight. In a matter of hours, tickets vanished. Every step they made was captured on camera, and social media was unable to stop discussing them. Nothing escaped the public's notice, not even a play, comment, or facial expression. That kind of strain could easily shatter the foundation of most teams. Competition for attention, vanity, and envy. They could have been torn apart by any of that. However, Lexie Hull witnessed an entirely different development. Something no one anticipated. Lexie saw the energy simply change after the first practice. In addition to talent, Caitlin's entrance brought a tsunami of attention that, to be honest, could have completely engulfed the team. However, the Fever really used the spotlight to unite themselves rather than allow it to separate them. Players such as Hull, who had already fought through the league's tough ups and downs, understood that togetherness was the only path ahead and that jealousy was the easy way out. We could sense how much she altered the surroundings. Once, Lexie discreetly shared. However, we learnt to ride it rather than fight it. The Fever weren't simply teammates behind the scenes. They were forming a relationship that extended far beyond the court. After late games, consider having dinner. They bonded through endless bus travels, quiet talks in deserted gyms, and laughter. Caitlin wasn't given the same treatment as a celebrity. She received the same treatment as them. She never felt alone thanks to the veterans. As the novices looked up to her while keeping their own responsibilities in mind. That careful balancing act between equality and admiration. It resulted in something quite potent. The relationship between Clark and Hull developed into one of the most subtly captivating tales in women's basketball as the season progressed. Lexie began to read Clark's intuition as if it were a second language. Lexie responded with amazing accuracy to Caitlin's moves and maneuvers, which required trust. They simply flowed like a single heartbeat as they continued to play. However, there was unceasing work, unending communication, and a common goal to demonstrate that they were more than just Caitlin's crew behind that flow. Then the storm arrived, which put everything to the test. That was the day Caitlin's injuries drove her from the floor. Caitlin skillfully threaded passes past opponents, and Lexie expertly finished them. Trust was more important than physical execution. Lexie trusted herself to deliver, and Clark trusted her to be prepared. The way both players found strength in their worst moments was what made their collaboration so unique. In the face of constant attention and unrelenting media pressure, Caitlin found solace in teammates like Lexie, who offered quiet and steadiness. In exchange, Lexie was motivated by Clark's unwavering determination and fortitude. They reflected one another, two disparate trajectories coming together to form a common perspective. No justifications, no fear, and no capitulation. It was impossible to overlook Lexa's growing role as the Fever season went on. Her self-assurance had entirely changed her from a supporting role to a crucial one. Fans and players began to notice that she was more independent, self-assured, and eager to take chances. Those who kept a close eye on her, however, were aware that her growth went beyond improved statistics. It dealt with mental development. The old uncertainties that used to surface following each missed opportunity or turnover have simply vanished. A player who firmly felt she belonged took their spot. No highlight reel could ever fully convey how Lexie and Caitlin had been changed by injuries, hardship, and pressure. Their tale was one of unwavering perseverance rather than sudden success. The kind of development that takes place in quiet times of introspection, in rehab sessions, and in deserted gyms. Collectively, they redefined what resilience truly is. Persistence, not perfection. Not dominance, but determination. So, is this just the beginning of something bigger for them? Please share your thoughts below. Remember to like and subscribe as well.